going to give it a few minutes before we get started because we do have a lot of attendees this evening and it does take some time for all of them to join the meeting. Yes, you are muted throughout tonight, but if you would like to speak, you can just raise your hand and we'll call on you. It's just the best way for us to manage the virtual meeting. But happy to call on you if you would like to speak. Okay, I think I'm going to get started here. So good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our town hall on growth and development. I'd like to start by just sharing how happy we are to meet with you tonight and engage in the questions that you have raised. So thank you for your participation. There's certainly a lot to learn on Oakville's history for planning for growth and development. And we are always encouraging our residents to get involved in the process, and we're happy to facilitate that for you however we can. So for tonight's agenda, we're going to start off with a presentation from Mayor Burton. Thank you, Mayor, for being here tonight. And then we'll go into the Q&A. There were quite a few questions that came in, and those that aren't addressed in the presentation, we can speak to after. You'll notice that there's a Q&A box below, so you can also, if a question comes to you and you'd like to ask it, you can type it in there and we'll be facilitating those at the end of the presentation. And then lastly, we have a video that speaks to this very subject, which the Mayor will share more about shortly. And with that, I will pass it over to my colleague, Councillor Sandhu.
Thank you, Councillor Farmer. I want to echo her comments with a warm word of thanks to everyone here in attendance today, and a huge thank you to staff who is here in attendance with us today, as well as Mayor Burton. I'm just going to do a quick roundtable introduction. We have the Commissioner of Corporate Services, Nancy Selly, here with us. Nancy, if you want to say hi. We've got the Director of Planning Services, which is Mr. Dave Charles.
Evening.
And the Director of Parks and Open Space, not Director of Parks and Rec, Mr. Chris Mark. And thank you so much, all of you, for joining today. And the man that does not require an introduction, Mr. Robert, our Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. This is a very good meeting to start something for you that I think you will turn out to have an abiding interest in, and that is we are in the middle of a period of review of how we will grow. This period of review is required by the province every so many years, and we've reached that point. And this review is being conducted at the upper level of our municipality, called the Region of Halton, as well as at the local level in each of the 4 municipalities that together comprise Halton. And at the end of the process, which is for the Halton region, is in July of next year, and for the town and for the 4 local municipalities in Halton, it's July of the next year, 2023. There's extensive opportunities for public participation. And what's being worked on is what will happen, how we will grow from 2031 to 2051. And the interesting angle here is that the future is decided long before the future comes in terms of land use planning. And so for those of you who are young enough to be sure you'll be here after 2031, this is something that you should participate in order to have your say. because the way the province organizes planning for the future, it's pretty much become a case of if you don't speak up at the start, it's very hard to make any changes later. So it's important. What right now you're able to do is participate in setting the vision for the 20 years between 2031 and 2051. And when we get to 2031, the vision will be set and not subject to a lot of change. So, and that's just the way it is in Ontario. And for that matter, I'm assured that it's very similar in all of the other parts of Canada as well. So I have two pieces for you. The first is a very brief slideshow that won't take but a few minutes that I'm going to show and comment on. And the second is a 30-minute slideshow that's pre-recorded and features the voice and the wisdom of one of our best planners, Mr. Jasper Avenue, who works for Gabe here. And the reason this 30-minute show is worth your time is because it tells you in detail how we got to where we are. And it also tells you where we are going, including some very interesting and important information about certain parts of where we have to go because of legislation from the province. So when we think about where we are today and when we think about what we'd like to have in the future, it's important to understand that, as I like to summarize it, we live in a crown system of government, and it's famous in political science that power flows down from the crown, not up from the grassroots. So we have to, we welcome the opportunities that the crown provides us to comment on their intentions and their plans. And I'm very happy that the Planning Act and the Growth Plan and the PPS have enough flexibility in them that we can create a town that looks different than other towns who are also subject, and cities who are also subject to the Growth Plan, the Planning Act, and the PPS. But there's a channel we have to stay in, and Oakville has a specialty at getting on the edge of the channel when we need to. But it's important to understand that nevertheless, there is a channel. So I'm now going to share my screen. But first, I've got to get Andrew to give me the power to do that again. I hope he's still listening. He hasn't heard me yet. Wait, now maybe. Yes. All right, now I have the ability to share my screen, and that's what I'm going to do. So here we go. Now, if only it would, there we go. So we have a town-wide urban structure, and we've built this up over the years. And this is a crucial component of what we call the Livable Oakville official plan, which governs how land gets used. And the colors here show you where our major growth areas are, and some minor ones as well. And they also show where our employment lands are, and where our residential lands are, and where our parks and green space are, or if you prefer, parks and open space. And the first thing you're going to notice is that there's a lot of residential space, and that's the, I'm going to call it buff color, the sort of pale yellowy color. And then the next thing you're going to notice is that there is a heck of a lot of green space. And in fact, there's probably more green space per capita in Oakville than in any other community in the GTA. That statement's also true of Halton as a general proposition. 51% of the land in Halton is preserved green space. Now, the cross-hatched green areas are on the left, the Bronte Creek Provincial Park, and across on top of the 407 that is the greenbelt, famous greenbelt. And what that basically means is there's no growing in those places, but they are in Oakville, and they are open space and green space that are much loved and much used by Oakville residents. Now, the next slide gives you a brief cut of our history. Halton region identified lands for growth back in North Oakville. That is the land above Dundas, which is what we're talking about tonight. They identified that for growth in 1987. And the way Ontario organizes municipalities, the lower level, that's us, has to conform upwards to the upper levels. And so when Halton decided that there was going to be growth above Dundas in 1987, it was Oakville's duty to plan accordingly. And that took another 20 years almost, and in many steps. And just as we have to conform upward to Halton, Halton has to conform upward to the province. Now, I want to point out to you that North Park, which is a really large, several hundred acres of parkland above Dundas on the west side of Nayagawa, was bought for future parkland back in that time. As a matter of fact, Mayor Bill Para, who was a one-term mayor back in the middle of the 80s, he took the first steps to acquire the North Park land, and the next mayor completed the purchase. But it shows you that Oakville has always been thinking ahead in terms of parkland, and that's why we have so much parkland and green space. Now, the 20 years that I referred to is the next point. The town obeyed the region and led a comprehensive planning study that lasted through the 90s and the early 2000s, and then suffered a bit of a delay of being implemented because the developers all appealed it, and that took several years. And in the end, the town prevailed, and they lost. And sometimes they will complain to me about how long it takes to get things built in Oakville, and I always hand them back the fact that I remember that they're the ones who added the delay. Anyway, all that work resulted in the North Oakville East and West secondary plans. And they were planned for 55,000 people to live there and 35,000 jobs to be found there. And in among it is a 900-hectare protected natural heritage open space, green space, if you will, plus 64 hectares of parks and village squares. And that natural heritage system is the first municipal greenbelt. The province has a very famous greenbelt that everybody's very fond of. And we in Oakville are very proud of having the first municipal greenbelt, or natural heritage system, as we call it. And by the way, we went on after creating that to create the enhanced Halton region natural heritage system. And that is what protects fully 51% of the area of Halton region. So there's your history lesson. Now I'm just going to show you a little map that shows you the North Oakville secondary plans area. There's an east and a west, as you're going to see. But the very first thing you might be interested to know is it's not all in Ward 7. Some of it is in Ward 6, and the Ward 6 part is now under very active construction. And the population of Ward 6 is, as a result, increasing. And if you can see my mouse pointer, Ward 6 is this area, you know, basically Trafalgar to Winston Churchill. And then I also wanted you to know that North Oakville is unique. Many of you in your questions have picked up on the fact that it's different. And the differences are that it's more pedestrian oriented, it's more walkable, it's got a bigger trail system. It was intended and designed to be what we call transit first. It specializes in compact and complete neighborhoods where you're supposed to be able to walk to your village, your little community center and find basic shops, you know, not not shopping centers, but basic needs. And the pattern of these 14 or 15 communities spread around North Oakville is influenced by the way the natural heritage system or the Oakville Greenbelt runs through the land. And above all, it's important to understand there is a diverse range of housing and employment opportunities designed into the plan. Now, I said there's an east and west secondary plan, and you can see this purple line, which is roughly the 16-mile Valley Creek. And on the west is the west plan. And this red crosshatched area is the Palermo area, which is going to be a major growth area. And then over here on the east of the 16-mile creek, this map doesn't distinguish between Ward 7 and Ward 6, but my cursor is running up and down the dividing line here. So you have 6 over here and you have Ward 7 here. It's very possible that some of you are from Ward 6 as well as 7, and for that matter, I promoted this in my newsletter, and it's very possible that you may not live in either one of these places. You may live in some other part of Oakville. So that is the way the two plans lay out. And this is another way of more clearly labeling east and west. And I'll just remind you that this is Trafalgar along here, and the border with Ward 6 is probably right along here. And so we've got an aerial shot to explain that this is what they call greenfield development. So it's basically undeveloped land, and it's too far into the history of the planning profession to persuade them to change the name of calling it greenfield development. As you can see, some of them are farmers' dirt fields. But anyway, this is a picture meant to illustrate that we're looking for walkable streets, mixed-use neighborhood centers, transit supportive and transit-oriented density, as well as a very, very large natural heritage system that is the envy of the rest of the town. And if I zoom in on Ward 7, almost all of this is Ward 7, you have a map that shows you how much green space and open space there is, and you also get to see where all the parks are, large and small. And this big green square here is part of North Park, but North Park includes land that goes all the way over to here. So there's a road that's going to go through it, but so there's a vast, I think there could have been almost 300 acres in the entire area, but at least 200, but I'm sorry, I don't remember the precise number, but it's by far the largest in the town. And now this official plan review that I advertised at the start of my presentation is in front of us. It's going to cover these various things. They'll make more sense to you if you stay and watch the 30-minute video that we'll come back to after I finish and we deal with your questions. And after your questions and answers, I'm looking forward to showing you that video. And then I'm going to attempt to answer a couple of questions, and then the counselors are going to handle the rest of them. But we had a question from you about development charges and how they're used. And basically, development charges are collected against a set of infrastructure projects that are listed in a spreadsheet, and the year or years in which they're going to be built is identified, and their estimated cost is identified, and all of that is then added up, and that's the amount of money to be raised by development charges on the builders. And they have and they use very vigorously the right to question and challenge and even appeal all of those things. But your town has a reputation for being just really, really good at this, and nobody's ever succeeded in. They don't mess with us anymore on our development charges because we have such a good reputation for doing it right. So so it's not tied to a geographic area. It's tied to actual projects that are tested in that process I described, which is like a contest almost, as to whether or not they're needed to handle the growth that's coming. And the growth is not just coming toward 7. Growth is coming all over Oakville. Growth is coming around the Oakville GO station. It's coming around the Bronte GO station. It's coming around what we're calling Palermo, which is Bronte Road north of Dundas. And there's an area in the southwest corner of Dundas and Trafalgar, so it's called Oak Park or Uptown, where the Walmart is. And that has been a growth area for a very long time, going back as far as it began in the 90s. And it isn't done either. So there's a lot more growth coming there. So that's, I hope, helps people understand that there is no assignment of development charges on a per capita or a per ward basis. They're on a per project basis. And by the way, that's a public process, and you are free to participate in that, and we advertise it when we do it. As for property taxes, this is how property taxes are calculated. It's a law that requires it to go this way. Every year we do a budget and we argue and debate and discuss what will be in the budget. And when we're done, that is the amount of money we need to spend. That amount of money is then divided by the total value of all the taxable property in town. And that yields the tax rate. And then that tax rate is applied against the individual property owner's property valuation. And that valuation is provided by the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, which is a provincial agency. And if you're good at math, you'll understand from the formula that I just described that as property values go up, if we don't increase our spending dramatically, the tax rate will go down. But the main point to be made here is there's no profit in the calculation of property taxes. When property values go up, the rate comes down so that we never get more money than we said we needed. So, and then the property taxes fund townwide services, and every resident of Oakville, no matter where the resident lives, has an absolute right to participate in and utilize town facilities all over town. Let me give you one very interesting, I think, example. There was an abandoned high school in the southwest of town that the town bought to keep it out of developers' hands around 2005. And then it was sitting there. And one of the reasons the town bought it was the town had built a swimming pool and a gymnasium in this school. And the school board decided to close the school and sell the land. And you know, the town would have been out its swimming pool and its gymnasium. So we bought it. And that was before my time as mayor. But it was basically continuing to be used only for the pool and the gym, and the rest of the building, you know, 130,000 square feet high school was going unused and kind of a wasting resource. We spent $35 million. I think when you add up, if you add up the amount of money that we spent buying the land and the amount of money we spent renovating that high school and rebuilding it, it's at least $30 million. And we did a very unique thing with that building. We turned it into an arts and culture center. If you haven't been there, you really should go. It is, to my, I did not expect this to turn out this way, but it is our single most popular facility, and it draws people from all over town. And the reason it does is because there's nothing else like it in Oakville. In fact, there's nothing else like it in Halton. I'm not even aware of anything like it anywhere else in the GTA, but I hesitate. You know, my knowledge of the GTA is not encyclopedic, so I'm not going to boast that it's the only one in the GTA, but it's certainly the only one in Halton. Every activity that moms and dads want their kids to have for arts and culture is in that building. There are music studios, TV studios, theater, orchestra rooms, woodworking, every kind of craft imaginable. And it's our busiest facility by far. And I thought that our sports facilities would continue to be our most popular. And even though I've raised 3 kids here myself, and they participated in arts and crafts and culture, I just didn't, I'm the most delighted to tell you how surprised I am at how popular that is. So I tell you that story at some length so that you understand that we don't do things on a per ward basis. It would never work. And another reason why we can't do it that way is we change our ward boundaries from time to time. In fact, Ward 7 didn't exist before the 2018 election. Ward 7 used to be mostly in Ward 5. And the part that's in Ward 6, I don't actually remember, but I think it was in Ward 6. So I think it stayed there. So that, I hope, helps you understand development charges and how they're used and how they're derived and how they're calculated and collected. And also hope you understand how property taxes work. Now, North Park has been a subject of great anxiety, not just among residents, but also on council. And council and I have been fairly distressed at the way the target date for it was receding every year. When we looked at it, it was later in the capital plan. And early this year in April, council decided to pass a resolution directing staff to bring it forward. So design is underway now. These are the ingredients that are intended to be in it. I expect groundbreaking next year, and it should take, based on how long it took to build the other ones that we've done, which is about a year, I would expect it to be open and operating for Ward 7 and everybody else in town in 2023. And you could probably reasonably expect it to be 12 months or about 12 months after construction begins. So, and it's already in the budget. It's not like you've got to pass through the eye of the needle of the budget committee for this. And the council direction in April was unanimous, so that should give you a little more comfort as well. So there you are. That is my what I call brief presentation, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And thank you for your attention. I hope you'll join me for the 30-minute show after your counselors work with you on your questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Burden. That was an excellent presentation, and it certainly did cover a lot of the questions that came in ahead of this meeting. I'm just going to go through some of the questions that I have here. And again, for the participants online, if you have a question, you can use the Q&A, and Councillor Sandhu can facilitate those. So there's a question. I'm just going to start with it on the community center, because that's where we ended. And that there is currently not enough amenities such as schools, community centers, sports facilities, green space, and parks. So we just heard the great news about the community center. And, you know, as Mayor Burden mentioned, it was in the budget for 2028. So we're extremely pleased to see it come forward, and really looking forward to the design and construction of that community center. And just, you know, I know there's a lot of people that are new to Oakville as well. That will be located at Dundas and Neagawa. It's just by the 16-mile sports complex where we have the large rinks, indoor rinks. So it will be accessible to all of our Oakville residents, but it is situated in Ward 7. And then I just wanted to quickly touch on the schools as well. I mean, we're with you on the schools. We are constantly talking to our provincial counterparts. A lot of people confuse school funding between municipal and provincial government. It is the provincial government that provides funding for the schools. And, I do want to say that the most recent 3 schools added to Oakville have all been in Ward 7. So we've had funding for a new school most recently. I believe that's a Catholic school. We had David R. Williams, which has been constructed and is now open to students, and we have the high school as well. So we're happy to see that the schools are being opened. We know we need more. And you can help us as well by having these conversations with your members of provincial parliament, and advocate. We certainly advocate for schools as we continue to see growth that is mandated to us by the province. So just wanted to make a point on that as well. And then someone sent in a question saying there's only one park in Ward 7. So I just want to clarify the boundaries. It is from Ward 7 runs from 8th line to Tremaine, and it's north of Dundas. So I believe the area that this person was referring to is William Rose Park. So there is that one park there, but we also in Ward 7 have Fowley Park, George Savage Park, Isaac Park, and as Mayor Burton had shared, there's a whole list of neighborhood parks that are going to be added to Ward 7. And I wonder if our Director of Parks has anything to add to our park construction and how we have negotiated, larger park land in Ward 7.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Yes, we will have 10 neighborhood parks across predominantly throughout Ward 7, a few in Ward 6. These will all be about 4.2 hectares each, which is very much larger neighborhood parks than we have south of Dundas. As Mayor Burton alluded to, we did a lot of pre-planning for North Oakville, and at the beginning we planned out where all these parks were going to be, so geographically we could space them out across the ward and ensure that we would be servicing all of the residential population and making sure the village squares, of which we'll have about 30 to 33 village squares across Ward 6 and Ward 7 and Ward 6, to make up the full 64.5 hectares of parkland that we will have in Ward 7 and Ward 6, including the wonderful 900 hectares of natural heritage system, which will have a complete trail system through it and will be open to the public as well. That is a gift to the town that we have. It's absolutely wonderful. It's unfolding as we speak, and we're adding each year to the natural heritage system as the town grows. So there is a wonderful amount of park space already in that Ward 7 and Ward 6, and much more to come in the coming years.
Thank you. And just to clarify, the village squares are the little parkettes that you see closer, tucked in little next of the neighborhood. So I certainly use them quite a bit with my kids, and I'm really happy that there are a lot of them are walk too. So certainly no shortage of parks for us. Director Mark, while I have you, there's a question on baseball diamond fields. I was hoping you could answer. And that is baseball diamond fields take a lot of green space that's dedicated to baseball teams only. Those in Ward 7, those baseball fields are rarely used. Since green space is limited, as previously discussed, can the city free half of the diamond field by removing the fence at the bottom of the baseball field? Just to give you some context, I think they're talking about William Rose Park, and I know me and you have had many discussions on how popular baseball is. So if you could just share your thoughts and any comments you have on that question, if it could be made smaller.
We have a number of baseball diamonds that are across North Oakville. I believe we'll have about 6 in total. These are predominantly used by our minor sports groups. We do dialogue with our minor sports groups, and we really provide the number of baseball diamonds that is outlined within our Parks and Recreation master plan. That is the guide that tells us what facilities which we should be planning and putting in our parks in the future. So the number of baseball diamonds that we're putting in is actually prescribed within our master plan, and the master plan will be updated starting next year and into early 2023. We've built the Bone Ball Diamond right now at William Rose. Geographically, we want to make sure that we do have a good geographic distribution of facilities across the town to make sure that people don't have to drive halfway across the town to find, so as an example, a baseball diamond. The fields are fully fenced because that is one of the requirements that we have because of the nature of the game. We do try and provide facilities that are available and can be used for tournament play. We have a number of minor sports teams in Oakville that play at a very, very high competitive level. So we do try to provide them the facilities that they can attract and host tournaments as well. It doesn't mean that the diamonds aren't available for people who just want to go on and use them on a casual basis, but the town does spend significant resources in terms of maintaining these facilities. So by and large, most of them are fenced, but they're not locked up during the day. So if a dad and son or mom and daughter want to go out and throw a baseball around, they can certainly do that. But in the evenings, they generally are permitted. And I think one of the issues that you're finding right now in that diamond in particular is that it was just completed prior to the pandemic, and there has not been a lot of play. Last year there was very little play at all, and it was a bit of a slow start as well this year. So I think what you'll see is starting next year, hopefully we'll be through a large part of the pandemic and have it behind us. I think you will see increased usage of the diamond there, as well as the one at George Savage as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer. I'm going to just, while we're on the topic of parks, there is a question about the ponds. So it says there are a few small ponds which are suitable for a place to relax and gather, but these areas should be made into small parks instead of building condos and townhouses. What are the plans? So I was hoping to call on Director Charles just to talk about the importance of our stormwater management ponds and what they're used for, and just wanted to clarify for our residents that these ponds actually have a purpose in our planning.
Sure, I can certainly do that. Thanks. So our stormwater management ponds are created as a result of a large amount of engineering that has to go into it, because when you're taking a large area that has permeable surface like farmers fields and creeks, etc., and you're turning it to impermeable, you have rooftops, you have roads, etc., that water has to go somewhere. So as a result of that, we engineer our stormwater ponds to accommodate the flows from those areas into those ponds. And they are sized according to how much volume is going to be created from storm events, because we do have to account for those large regional events like the Hurricane Hazels that we had years ago. And those types of events, when they do create those kinds of surges, we need to be able to accommodate that water, but not just then run it out into the creeks. Because the disadvantage of that is you end up with downstream erosion, and it really affects the quality of our streams, our creeks, and eventually the lake. So there's a large amount of effort that goes into how we design those ponds and the reason for those ponds, and also a maintenance schedule for those ponds, because we have to do cleanouts to those because they accommodate sediment that runs into them. And it's also why we ensure that there isn't any skating on them in the winter and whatnot, that they're really to be maintained as a part of our civic infrastructure is the intent behind that. So, and I also didn't want to lose the fact that Mayor Burton had his hand up a little bit, so I hope I didn't steal his thunder.
No, you did fine. I was thinking of jumping in on the end of Chris's comment about the baseball fields. In the question, there was an assumption stated that there was a lack of green space, and in the slides I just showed, which the questioner may not have seen. I took pains to point out that there's actually more green space in Ward 7 than anywhere else in town, and more green space in Oakville than on a per capita basis and whatnot than anywhere else in the GTA. We also have the highest amount of urban forest tree canopy. It's just below 30%, and we have a massive tree planting program, I should call it, that plants thousands of trees every year to reach our target of having the American Forest Institute's recommended 40% urban forest canopy by the 200th anniversary of our town in 2057. We calculated that we needed 1 million more trees, and how fast could we plant them, and that's how it worked out.
Thanks, Member. There's a couple of questions about just kind of logistics. They wanted to know if you were able to share your presentation with them after the fact. Maybe we can email that out to the list. And then there's another question just generally about schools. 2 public schools have much more students than other schools in the wards, and DDW opened just last year with several portables.
Yeah,
Please go ahead.
Councillor Sanju, I've got 2 bits for you, and then I think you guys have information too.
Yeah.
First, on the schools, it's been a matter of public concern and political concern in all over Halton, not just Oakville, at the slowness with which the province builds not only the schools, but the rest of what it's responsible for to handle the growth that it's mandated that we have to accept. And I meet, and your councillors meet, every year we get a chance to talk to the relevant provincial cabinet ministers about this, and we always complain about it to them. And I can say that during the greatest part of my 15 years as mayor, it was the Liberal government that we were complaining to, and it didn't make any difference. And for the last 3 years or so, it's been a Conservative government, and it hasn't made a lot of difference. To their credit, they have lately given us a few schools, but you can tell how far behind we are on schools in Halton by the fact that we have 500 portables in Halton instead of proper classrooms. And we don't have 500 in Oakville, and Milton is the one that really suffers from excess portables. But the province attempts to keep its taxes down by only building things after they're desperately needed rather than in advance. And then they force the school boards to close schools. If a school is in an area where everybody's aging and the kids have grown and left, that neighborhood will turn over in a few years and there'll be little kids again. That happens like the seasons of the year, only on a longer time span. But the school board, in order to build a new school, will then close that school. In the oldest part of town, they closed 3 schools so that other schools could be opened in the younger part of town, let's call it. So the schools it's a terrible problem. And the only thing that works so far that we've found is concerted public pressure. Your councillors and I, and not just your Ward 7 councillors, but the other 12 as well, together, we try to keep up a steady drumbeat like rain on the province, but it helps us when the public amplify our effort by writing letters to their member of provincial parliament. In the case of people who live above Upper Middle Road, that member is F.E. Triantafilopoulos. And of course, below Upper Middle Road, it would be Stephen Crawford. Councillor Sanju, what was the first question? I spent so long on the second one, I forgot it.
No worries. We had a very quick question, just a logistical question, whether your presentation would be shared after the fact.
Oh,
I think the answer to that
We're
is-
recording this and we're going to make the whole show available, including the 30-minute bit that I'm really hoping that sooner or later, either now or when we post it, that you will benefit from seeing.
Mayor Burton, maybe we can spend just a minute. I don't see any current questions in the chat, but maybe we can spend a minute just talking about the buckets of work that we see at different levels of government. I know you spoke a little bit about the crown system of government, but we tend to, at the local level, and Councillor Palmer can attest to this as well, whenever we're outdoor docking or we're at events, we tend to get a lot of questions about schools because our neighborhoods are so new and with very, very young families. Can we talk a little bit about just like ownership and what the town is actually here for? We put the pipes in the ground so the school can be built.
Yeah.
But what else do we do?
All right. So let's back up to the Constitution. You know, hilariously, my wife teaches politics at Ryerson University. So if she were hearing this, I have no idea if she would approve, but here's my version. The Constitution divides duties and responsibilities and powers between the nation and the provinces. And there are some shared duties and responsibilities and powers, but in the areas that are exclusively national and in the areas that are exclusively provincial, neither side has a say in the other's business. And that is because in their wisdom, the founders of Canada decided that we were going to be what's called a confederation. And so it's like semi-equals banding together and then grudgingly agreeing, oh, maybe we need a few things on a national level, but not too many. So that's my take on the origin of Canada's government. And in the province, the way municipal services work, the municipalities in the Constitution are reserved to the provinces. And so the provinces think of municipal services as things that are too hard to deliver from Queen's Park. There is a city of Dryden with 7,500 people, you know, on a good day, 7,500 people in the city of Dryden, and you've got 200,000 or so people in the town of Oakville, and you know, 750,000 or more in the city of Mississauga. There are a lot of different sizes out there, and one size would not fit all. Even the province, all parties seem to recognize that. And so, instead of delivering what we think of as municipal services from Queen's Park, the legislature creates cities and towns and basically municipalities. And in fact, they call us all municipalities, and they don't care whether we call ourselves towns or cities or anything else. The Municipal Act actually says you can call yourself anything you want, but you're a municipality. Harry Barrett, who was mayor back in the 70s and early 80s, when Oakville had 70,000 people, taught everybody to say, and I was privileged to know him before he passed, and he taught me to say what he used to say, which is Oakville is a city that calls itself a town and acts like a village. And those are the truest words I've ever heard said about our town. So the province says, here, you guys have to have a local government in order to deliver these services that are too messy for us to mess with. And if you don't do it the way we like, we have a veto power and we have the ability to intervene. So, and in fact, until 2006, the Municipal Act, which is how the legislature governs us, it used to say, and Nancy, I may have the year wrong, it could have been 2001, but anyway, before 2001 or 2006, it used to say, here's the list of the only things you can do as a municipality. And they amended it, I think it was in 2006, but it doesn't matter. They amended it to say, all right, you're a mature level of government, and so you can do anything you think your residents want, unless we disagree. So, you know, it used to be you had to ask permission to do something. Now you get to decide to do it and look over your shoulder and hope they don't come in and tell you, nah, you can't do that. Now, in our town, they've never done that to us. And we have done a thing or two that was daring. In fact, we have a pretty good reputation as an innovator and a fairly daring bunch of people. And I think that follows from who lives here. This is a town full of very accomplished and achieving people. This is a great place to live because of who lives here, would be my contention. So those municipal services are in Halton, divided between the Halton region and the 4 local municipalities. And to give you an idea, that division is somewhat arbitrary. There are other regions who divide the services differently than we do. For example, next door in Peel, they have a regional bus system. And in Halton, we have local bus systems where we have bus systems. The town of Halton Hills, which is a gigantic portion of the Halton region up in the northeast, you know, relatively close to Brampton, to this day doesn't have a bus system. And the town of Milton, bless their hearts, has the beginnings of a bus system, but it's nothing like what we have. The city of Burlington, next door to us, I'll describe it this way. They have about 50 buses and we have about 100. And we give, as a result, far more service. And we deliver, before COVID, more than 3 million rides a year. And Burlington delivers more than 2 million rides a year. But your council decided 15 years ago to double the size of its transit system and make it easier to use transit and to increase the number of people on transit. We've had great success with that on Trafalgar. And I think the secret of that success is it's like 5 minutes between buses. You know, you never have to stand. When I was young, my wife and I and our 3 little kids, we lived in North Toronto near Avenue Road. And there was very good bus service there, but it was every 20 minutes. So just to give you a comparison of how good it is on Trafalgar. So that division is different across the regions, and we can change it. And at your regional council, for the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a lot of discussion about merging our transit systems, which I have opposed. And I've opposed it because I don't want to water down our, you know, if you average the level of service that the 4 communities give, you've got 0 for 1, and you've got, let's call us 10. And nobody from Burlington is here to yell at me. I'm going to call that 5, and I'll call Milton 3 or 2. When you average that, you don't get 10 anymore, and you'll have a lot less transit. So I hope that helps. There's 50 or 60 municipal services, and I would put you to sleep if I talked about all of them. I hope these are the more exciting ones.
I think that was a pretty good synopsis. Thank you so much, Mayor Burton. We actually have a new question from Lou for Director Charles. It's about the newly built condos on Dundas. And they're really talking a little bit about clearance guidance and setbacks. I think, Gabe, is really what they're asking. Do you want to jump in there?
Well, before he does, absolutely there are setbacks, and they've been chosen as part of the planning exercise because of the kind of community that the town set out to build. Gabe?
And following on that, there is a lot of thought that goes into the proximity of buildings to streets. And as Mayor Burton is saying, the investment that the town has made into transit, we want to be able to leverage that to the greatest extent possible. So that means trying to make it as accessible as possible for people by having buildings closer to the street that allows people to then have a shorter distance that they can walk to get to the to the bus service, noting full well that in the future we anticipate having bus rapid transit available on both Dundas and Trafalgar. And that's why the density that we have in our plan is proposed along those major corridors, so you can make use of the transit that's there. In addition, what I would say is that some suggest that there are health issues associated with proximity to major roads like that. And I will say that we do ensure that we include Halton Region and their health department when we do circulations of these. And it is one of the things that the health department often flags for us, is ensuring that we have highly walkable areas, so that we're not encouraging reliance on the automobile, that people have the opportunities to walk and have healthy lifestyles. So there's a number of factors that goes into our thought process and our rationale for where we place buildings and how we organize our communities.
I think that's probably a bit of a tie back to Gabe, to Director Mark Chris's comments about parks in the north specifically. I think that the parks and the open space that we have, with how strategically we've placed the buildings, has really kind of added to that level of help and support, especially during COVID. I've found that our parks have been very well utilized. And I think that everybody here has been really thankful to have them.
I want to add one thing. I have a lot of friends who live north of Dundas, and one of the things that they're very happy about is that since they bought their homes, they've appreciated immensely, and they've turned into really good investments. And the only reason that that's true is that it's such an attractive place to live that people are still lining up to live there. I have lived in communities where nobody lined up to buy your house. And when you needed to sell your house, the exercise was pick a number and then start cutting. Every week or two you'd lower it, hoping that you'd finally get a seller. It's not like that in Oakville, and it's not like that in North Oakville. These are tremendous communities.
Is there anyone online that would like to ask a question or would like to speak? If you want to raise your hand, we can unmute you, or we've kind of gone through all the questions that are in the Q&A. So if we don't see any more questions, I think it would be a great time to start the video that Mayor Burton wanted to share with us, which he's very excited to do so. So looking forward.
I'm trying to show you this video. So this video was made by our planning department under Gabe. And we have a very, very talented young man. I hope he isn't offended if I call him a young man, Jasper Avenue. And he made this slideshow and narrated it for the Community Leaders Roundtable. For, I think, 12 years, I've been running a monthly meeting of the leaders of all the community groups in Oakville, residents associations, environmental groups, business groups, you name it. Everybody who's the leader of an Oakville group is welcome to assemble at the with me and my staff at the end of every month, and I brief them on what the town is up to. For example, this major planning review that we're in the middle of, this, I mean, it's like it's been 2 or 3 years already. We've got another 2 years to go, so it's a pretty big deal. And Gabe's staff and Gabe have been several times to the CLRT, as we call it. And so this video is Jeff presenting his slides. It's full of wonderful bits, and it really and the most important part is, if you can get, you really need where we came from, and he covers that, and you need to get, how we got where we are. And he then covers where we're going given the province's laws. And that's crucial to understand. And the community leaders really liked it. I really like it, and I'm recommending it to you. And if I can remember how to share my screen, I'm about to show it. And here we go, I think. although I'm not sure it's playing for me. I'm gonna, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. All right, I'm still working on this. I wonder why? Oh, I think it crashed. So
the province did a good job of labeling the bill so that.
okay, be patient. We're almost there. Okay.
The province. So, really, I don't have anything new to say after what the mayor has talked about and what Kurt Benson has talked about. So I get to just reinforce a lot of what they've been saying, and then maybe help digest some of the stuff that's been brought forward.
All right. With any luck, this is working.
This is a phrase I'm going to start with. I'm going to say Oakville is growing and continues to grow. And what's interesting about this phrase is that my girls at my house, I have 3 young girls, 7, 5, and 3, and they repeat this phrase quite often because I dabble a little bit in video making and sometimes in these educational videos, and they love for me to replay all the little bits I've created. And this is one of the phrases that was in one of those clips. And so then they talk about all the time, and they're like, Oakville is growing and continues to grow. And it's good when they say that because it reminds me that it's true, right? I think there's a tendency to think that once a community is built, it doesn't change. It stays the way it is and doesn't change. And I don't think that's really true. And so this is I want to show you this little animation that I find quite interesting. And it's one of our GIS technicians put this together a few years ago. And what it is, it's an illustration of all the residential subdivisions in Oakville showing up on the year that they were registered. And so what I think it shows very quickly is that, so this will actually start in 1850, but since about 1945, with the end of World War II, subdivisions really started to be added to Oakville, and that's how Oakville expanded. Now, I think
Mayor Burton, you need to unmute your mic so we can hear the audio.
really think about what was that land before these subdivisions came in. And I would argue it's a lot of natural area, a lot of agricultural fields that we've been expanding onto. So just keep that in mind because I think that helps feed into the conversation a little bit later. Let me go back and see if I can get this playing here. You can see here, it's pretty, it hasn't changed much, in the late 1800s, starting with downtown Oakville. And you can see the years tick by, and I think in the early 1900s, there were a few, subdivisions that got registered right around here. But for the most part, there hasn't been too much. But then if you watch and pay attention to about 1945, right after World War II, you can see things really start to change. And here we go. So you can see a lot of, residential subdivisions were added, spreading out along the lake, and then starting to creep, north of what is now the QEW into the 80s and 90s, and all the way up to 2000. And then this illustration stops at 2017, and you can see up there, in North Oakville, north of Dundas. And if this were to continue, and if we, updated this, we'd start to see, more residential subdivisions up here in North Oakville, and you can see that we've been expanding out. And I would say that, probably within the next decade or so, we're going to essentially reach our boundaries, right, that we've been talking about. This is the traditional way Oakville has grown and accommodated growth is by expanding, or sprawling, if you will, out. And I think we're coming to a point where we need to, maybe there's a time to shift the way we think about how we accommodate growth. So what I'm showing here is more of, this isn't, we haven't been doing this by ourselves. All our neighbors have been doing this as well, whether it's Mississauga, Burlington, Milton, they've all been growing too. So I borrowed this image. This is the settlement areas map from the region, which shows in orange the built up area, which is really about, what was built up around 2006, 2007, somewhere in there. And you can see those orange areas. And then the purple areas are what was approved the last time the region did a regional official plan review. So those are basically areas that have been designated for new residential subdivisions. You can see, as Kurt was saying, Burlington and Oakville, we've hit our limits. And Milton, you know, is getting there. They're a little bit behind us, I would say. You know, they've got to grow out and meet their boundaries. And then Georgetown and Halton Hills, the same way. But we just can't now spill over the borders of Oakville and continue growing like we did in order to accommodate more people. You know, I would say something needs to change. And so part of it is, as we've been talking about, oh, we need to protect our natural areas, we need to protect agriculture, and I think these are great things. And I mean, that's part of what the Greenbelt Plan is all about at the provincial level. So when you put this green overlay on, you can see that, yeah, now we're really hitting up against these boundaries that we have. But you can see these, you know, the lighter colored areas, those are where Kurt was talking about. That's where choices need to be made about what to do with those lands. Do we continue to expand, you know, add subdivisions, residential subdivisions, like I think we've all done in the past, or do we need to do something different? Because we know that comes at a trade-off, right, for agricultural lands, and we want to protect, you know, there's a lot of voices saying, hey, let's protect those agricultural lands that we have, because we've lost so many already. So this is just another way of showing what Kurt was talking about. The province has said, okay, Halton, you need to plan for 1.1 million people, 500,000 jobs. And so the regional official plan, as Kurt was saying, is to figure out, okay, where are we going to put all those people in the future from here, you know, going from here. So now coming back to the town's perspective, as the mayor's been saying, well, we've done a lot of work at the town level to figure out, okay, where can we find places to grow? Because quite frankly, we can't grow outward anymore like we have been. We need to find new places to grow. And so what this here is Oakville's urban structure. It was adopted by council through Official Plan Amendment 15. And it's really based on, so if we can't expand out, where do you go, right? Well, I think it's up. Quite simply, you got to go up. It's up instead of out if you can't go out anymore. And so what this plan is well, where you can't go up everywhere in Oakville. We don't want that. We know very well that as Oakville residents, we love what Oakville is today, right? We love our established, mature neighborhoods. We love our natural areas. We love our natural features. We love our parks. So if we want to protect those and not grow onto those by just expanding more, well, then we need to go up. We just don't really have an option. And I think that's part of the question that's happening at the regional level too, is right, do we continue to expand out, or do we now focus on going up, that intensification that Kurt was talking about. So this is a structure based on the idea of nodes and corridors. We have where's the right places to go up? Well, you can't just go up and then still build it in a way that everybody needs a car to drive. Because when you add more people, we all know, that means more cars on the road if that's the only way that you can get around. And quite, I would say, studies, our transportation studies show that everybody chooses to drive a car for, over 90% of the places, times that they want to go somewhere. So we need to not only go up, but we need to put those in places where people will choose not to drive as much. That's an important part of addressing climate change as well, but it's also addressing, traffic congestion. We don't want to be fully congested on our roads either. So that's what this is the nodes and corridors. Then you can put that growth in places that can support really good transit. It can support really good ways to walk and bike. But it's also about mixing uses and building compactly, because then you don't need to travel as far to get to things, right? So traditionally we have our houses here, our stores over here, our offices over here, and you got to drive to get to all of them. Well, let's try to mix them together better and create these places where you don't need to drive as much. And so that's what this urban structure is all about. Well, what does that look like? And so I borrowed this image actually from the region. It was in their regional urban structure discussion paper, and I really like it because it starts to give a three-dimensional perspective on the 2D maps that we often work with. And then as you can see, there's a hierarchy to these areas. So urban growth centers are where the province has said this, you know, these areas, this is where most of your intensification needs to go. And then, so in Oakville, that's Midtown, right? It's around the GO station. It's on an established transit corridor already with the Lakeshore West GO line. And in fact, the Midtown GO station is the second busiest station in the entire GO network. That says something to me, right? I mean, Union Station is the only one that's busier. So that makes it a really good place to go up, in my opinion, and provide a place where people don't need to drive every time they want to go somewhere. So then we've also got these other growth nodes that the mayor was mentioning as well, right? So we've got our Bronte GO major transit station area, again, along the Lakeshore West GO line. But we've also got areas like Uptown Core at Dundas and Trafalgar. We've got the Palermo Village plan, and you know that has just recently been at council as well, and will be coming again. We've got the hospital district. So these are all, I would argue, kind of the the middle ground type of strategic growth areas that are shown on this concept. And the mayor even mentioned, okay, we've got some smaller ones, right? So these little smaller nodes that are these are our main street areas, is how we refer to them, right? And those are the ones that have those shopping streets already. So it makes sense. Okay, let's put people there. You know, they've got some of that mixture of uses in the walkable streets already there. Let's put some people there as well. And all of this is predicated on a system of higher order transit corridors, right? So that when you put people here, you need that critical mass to make transit work. You can't just, you know, if you only build a little bit, and it's still not enough to really make transit viable, that's probably the worst case scenario, I would say, because you're going to get places where transit's not supported, and we're going to have more people, but the only way to get around realistically is with a car. So what we need to do is get that critical mass into these areas. And you may remember a little while back, I wrote a discussion paper that went to council, and in it, I said, you know, we need to be all in for growth when it comes to Oakville. And I think that was met with a little bit of maybe shock by some councillors and some others, but and now my colleagues always bug me. I'm the all-in guy, right? They want to make me T-shirts that say I'm all in, kind of thing. But you know, joking aside, I still stand by that statement because we need people to make this system really work, right? You need to have the people create the critical mass to create these great environments that support transit, that really make it and have really good bike paths and walking, so that it's really easy for people to choose not to drive their car. And I'll get into a little bit more of that a little bit later, but that's where this urban structure that we've developed in town is what we're using that to feed up into the region's plan. And I hope you can see some of what Kurt was showing certainly reflect this nodes and corridor idea that the town has developed. And so, like the mayor said, I think we're for the most part, you know, we're in alignment in that regard. So, like I said, the town's been doing a lot of work. So I'm just going to show you a few visuals. This here is the Palermo Village demonstration plan that town staff created, and it's a really good example of building compactly, mixing uses, you know, creating good tree-lined streets that are great for walking. You can see it's got a grocery store plan. This is ideally to be like a community center. It's got a park, a transit center to help with that, and then, you know, this is a mixture of office and residential in here, as well as some ground-oriented housing to really get a mix and create a complete community. And that's what we're really trying to do in all of these growth areas, create a complete community. Another way of looking at it is that 15-minute neighborhood, right, where you can basically walk to most everything that you want to do in your day without having to get into a car necessarily. So this one is another demonstration plan for the Bronte GO MTSA, Major Transit Station Area. This was prepared by our consultants. And again, this is a little bit different because there's an existing employment. So this one would have, I think, a higher employment character to it. But it's the idea of whether it's people or jobs, let's concentrate them around transit stations to really create, again, that walkable environment where people can work and live close to transit. And You can see here, again, it's about going up, right? It's about getting some of that height in there, because that's how you make more efficient use of the land, and you can accommodate more people on less land than we have before. Just another demonstration plan done by our consultants. This one's for the hospital district. And again, you can see some of the same principles going in, right? It's about creating really good design at the base, right? Really attractive environment to be when you're in the street and in the public realm, but there's height involved, right? You need to go up, because that gives you the opportunity to build the stuff at the ground level that you need. And then if you go up, in our existing built areas, that's when it has a ramification out in places like Milton and Halton Hills, where if we can accommodate people within Oakville, within built up areas in Burlington and Milton, you don't need to continue to expand, right? It requires a shift. It's going to be, we're probably looking at housing people more in apartment style housing. But even that is evolving and changing. It's not like, we remember apartments being back in the 1960s. I think design has come a long way in the last, 60 or 70 years that we're talking about. So maybe you remember me presenting just a couple of weeks ago at Planning and Development Council about Midtown. And so these are some of the images that were included in that presentation. And this one really focuses in on the importance of designing the public realm, right? It's how those buildings meet the street that are extremely important. How do you build those spaces in between, right? How do you provide a nice place to be, a nice place to walk, to ride your bike, those type of things, so that it becomes a community that you want to live in, right? It's not just a tower in the park idea that may have been, purported a number of decades ago. So in Midtown, we're really focusing in on the design, right? The devil's always in the details, but it's about height, right? You may have heard at that meeting that a developer came in and said, I really think 45 to 50 stories is appropriate in this location. And so, when we're talking regional level, I hear a lot of things about, hey, we got to protect our natural areas, we got to protect our agricultural land, and climate change is really important. And it is, but but I find it, I personally, and I'll be a little bit honest here, is that I find it disheartening when I go and I present plans for Midtown, which this is where most of our intensification is supposed to come, and I met with resistance to height, right? Like, oh, 20 stories, that's really high, and it's tough, because we need to have some of that height, and that density in order to achieve some of the things that we want to protect. If we want to protect our mature neighborhoods from development pressures, well, we got to find places to grow that allow that to happen, and we enable that, we encourage it to happen. And our urban growth center would be, the most important piece of that puzzle to allow that to happen. So I'm actually inclined to agree with, a developer who says, yeah, we need 45, 50-story buildings, because if you think about what we've already got in Oakville, there are actually quite a number of 20-story buildings that we've already got. We've got some in Kerr Village, we've got some down near Bronte Village along Marine Drive. You think about Trafalgar Road, there's 15 stories, there's 20 stories, even up in behind Town Hall, for example. And we've got a 25-story, tower going up in Uptown. So if that's what we've already got, and Midtown is supposed to be the place where we actually even have more growth, doesn't it make sense that we should be even higher than what we've already done? That we should allow those taller buildings to happen? Because there's a number of things that happen. When you allow things to go higher, there may be more opportunity for developers to then invest in stuff at the ground level. Say, for example, this linear park that you see here that we're showing as an idea, and to maybe provide rooftop amenity areas, right? So when I think about, I have a young family, and if I was going to have my family live in say in Midtown, I'd want to make sure that whatever building I was in, I had opportunities to get my kids outside. Whether it's a public park or a plaza, but even within the development itself. And I think by allowing height, you can start to ask for some of those things, those really good amenity areas that you might start to get. And you can see some of those, they're showing up, up here on top of some of these buildings. But then you get, all the things that you need mixed in a really good environment. And I could talk about that for a long time, but I'll move on. But I think it's really important to, I guess not necessarily be afraid of height, because I think it gets us a lot of the really good things that we want as well. So now, if you permit me, I'm gonna kind of transport you out of even Ontario for a second and bring you back to my hometown. And this here is Edmonton. My hometown is Edmonton, and this is the neighborhood I lived in. And right in that little dot, that's where I used to live. So I lived in a 10-story building. I had 1,100 square feet, 2-bedroom apartment in the top floor. And what I really loved about this place is that everything was close by, right? So I worked down over here at this building. So it was a 20-minute walk. It was a great way to get out. 20 minutes of walking was fabulous. I could bike it quicker, but walking is what I choose to do. There's a grocery store right here. There's another grocery store over here. My doctor's office was over here. There's coffee shops down here along this street that I will show you in a sec. And this road here, this is Jasper Avenue, which runs into the main downtown core, but this was great because I could just walk out. It was 2 minutes to get to the end of the block, and I never had to wait more than 5 minutes, and I could catch a bus to wherever I wanted to go, right? It would bring me directly in and connect me with everywhere else. There was even an LRT, and you can see the LRT crosses the river here and heads underground. So there was an underground station over here. That was a 10-minute walk for me to get into that. That would bring me across the river into the university area where I had other friends. It was great. And if you notice here, there's a lot of, I think Edmonton is really good about street trees, right? Which I think Oakville is great at as well. And it's a very important part of any of our growth areas. And you can see the tree-lined streets that are happening in here. There's a, there's a little park. What was great is that we could walk, my wife and I, we could walk. There was a farmer's market every weekend on one of the streets over here. And it's great. Like I always joke that in my childhood in Edmonton, a river always runs through it. And the river valley was a great amenity. And I think about this, I mention it because Midtown has 16 Mile Creek, quite close to it. Palermo has Brawny Creek, so there's some natural features that really tie in. And if you have that proximity, that really help create a great place to live. So now I'll just bring you right down to street level. This here was the building I lived in. And this street, I wouldn't say, it's fabulous design or anything, but it's very simple, right? It's got sidewalks, it has trees. And what I want to emphasize is that for me, it didn't matter what the height of the building was when I was walking there. I was just more interested in what was happening down at street level, whether my building was 10 stories, 15 stories, or 20 stories. And there were those heights mixed in this neighborhood all over the place. It didn't really matter because the streets were really good and really comfortable and a great place to be. So this is just looking the other way. Again, here's my building. But here's something that's really interesting. And most people don't notice this, but you can see this level here. This is actually offices right within my 10-story building. So it was a mixture of uses right here. Across the street, this was probably a 15-story building. It had a pub in the bottom. It had some legal offices. It had, a hair salon, right? But all mixed right within the street. And another piece that I really enjoy about Edmonton is that on-street parking is part of that design, right? It creates a buffer, but it also provides parking supply. Parking is a big issue these days in Oakville. And I think there's a lot of space on our streets that we could utilize. There was also parking under my building and things like that too. But for me, it was just, it was a neighborhood of height that I really enjoyed. So other pieces of it, so this is my walk to work. I'd come and there were places where you could cut through where cars couldn't get. So this is what we're thinking for Midtown as well, right? You've got great places to walk, to bike. And I hear that from the, from the comments that are coming in from the community is that, hey, this is hugely important. And I wholeheartedly agree. So when you think about that linear park, this is an example of another street that I would walk down on my way to work. And you can see, 2 sidewalks, some great tree planting, double row of tree planting. And you've got a great place to be. And yeah, there's some tall buildings around, but that's not what really really predominates the environment. It's really what happens at street level. So this here is the farmer's market I was showing. And this is more over in the downtown core. But again, it starts to show that, there's some pretty tall buildings here and built on podiums that are about 4 to 6 stories. But when you get down at street level, again, you're taking pictures and you don't even really notice this height that's right beside you. And so this was on a weekend. This would just be on a regular day. You can see this is like a quasi grocery store, restaurant combination. They've got places to sit out here. You're getting about is that when you create these environments, you start to attract people who want to work next to where they live, right? So that's when you start mixing uses in Midtown. Maybe people don't even travel into Toronto anymore, right? They live and work in Oakville. And I think that's part of how we accommodate the jobs that the province is looking for us to have as well. I just wanted to show you, this is where we used to go for coffee all the time. It's a 5-minute walk away. And then you can see you go down to the end of the street, and I won't belabor the point too much. We get this, wonderful vista. Again, tall buildings, but when you're down at street level, it's really not what you notice. And again, I point this out because, I think we can take advantage of 16 Mile Creek as well in Midtown and really use that as a community amenity in terms of even just passive view, for example. And then I think I show this one. This is just my wife and I walking on that promenade. And I know I've heard like the idea that, oh, if I can see it, it impacts me. Well, I would argue I can see these buildings. And for me, this is part of what I remember about being really cool about Edmonton, right? You had this great natural features. And yeah, you had these buildings popping up. I think they added to the ambiance and to the environment rather than detract. And so I just wanted to show some of these images to say, look at, I really don't fear height. In fact, there's part of me that kind of misses it. Because if you do it right and you design it right, it can be a huge asset to our community. And so maybe I'll just leave it there, but just wanted to give you a sense of kind of maybe some of my thoughts about what the region's doing and what some of the work the town's been doing.
All right. I hope you found that as interesting as I said it would be. And as I say, all of tonight's session will be posted online, and you'll be able to refer your friends and relations to it. And your counselors and I and staff are always happy to hear from you. We're happy to discuss the present and the future with you. And we are here to help. We pride ourselves on Oakville being constantly working to be Canada's most livable town, and your input to that goal is vital to our achievement of the goal. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you so much for your attention to all that we shared with you, and we look forward to continuing our relationship.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining, and have a good night. And again, please feel free to reach out to us by email if you have any additional questions. Thank you, Mayor Burden.
I changed my background so that you could see a neighborhood with single family homes and those tall towers that Jeff was just talking about. This is circa 1970 and right next to Town Hall. One of our council members, one of our longest serving council members, lives just down and sort of to the right and then back towards us in a link home. This picture would be even better if you could see the link homes, the single family homes, and the towers behind, because it really shows that the concept of mixing these together is not brand new. It goes back a good 50 years at least. And actually, I'll tell you what I think is a funny story. I moved to Oakville about 30 years ago, and in downtown Oakville, one of my new friends was explaining to me that they had a 4-story height limit in the downtown district, which strictly wasn't quite true when he said it, but at any rate, that's what he said. And he said this funny expression. He said, if 4 stories is good enough for Paris, it's good enough for Oakville. And I looked at him and I said, well, gee, I just got back from Paris. And the really old stuff is 6 stories, walk-ups, no elevators, and most of it's 10. And he goes, well, then to hell with Paris. But, many people consider Paris to be a very livable place. So if we continue to work together and share our information, I'm sure we're going to get to the best possible future. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.